Jon Romano. Welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health here on YouTube. Hey, this is a really good episode. It's going to be a two-parter, so you're just going to get the first part. It's with Jon Romano, and he was a school shooter. So he's been kind of the perpetrator of sorts when it comes to violence, but he's also been on the other side. That will be part two. He'll talk about his adventures of being in a violent and traumatic situation. And hey, if you or a loved one are suffering with some addiction issues, mental health issues, whatever, please check out Canadian Centre for Addictions. Please phone 1-855-971-0515 and talk to somebody today. And hey, please hit subscribe and like and that bell and share and all that kind of good stuff. There's a link down below. There's to buy me a coffee or to buy some merchandise. Do all that stuff. And anyway, without further ado, I give you Jon Romano.
You know, obviously support makes a huge difference. And I've been very lucky to have a lot of support from, so many people that like you said, positive mentality, I think helps us out not just mentally, but physically as well. Whether it was while I was in the hospital or just since I've been home, keeping that positive mindset is what really keeps me motivated and keeps me moving forward instead of just plateauing and being like, okay, I'm comfortable here. It's like, no, I can keep going. I can keep doing more. And I think that's really what we should all be aiming for.
Nice. Yeah. I've kind of been on a journey myself the last 10 years or so of healing and trying to just be a better me, really. And it's pretty easy to spin your wheels and get stuck for a little while. But I think I'm at the point where it's like I'm self-aware enough that and I have enough supports too around me to like give me a nudge when maybe I'm not being self-aware enough to like, okay, it's time to do some maintenance again there, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, no, it's like we're talking about having the short-term goals, long-term goals, knowing the difference and not allowing ourselves to get stuck in that rut too much, but also not beating ourselves up when we do get stuck, right? And I think that's the catch-22 is a lot of us, we get, in that that rut where life just plateaus or even goes downhill. And instead of being like, okay, this happens, I'll be okay in the future, and then doing what we can to pull ourselves out of it, we just be like, oh, I'm such a fucking loser. And we just end up beating ourselves up more, which is what helps with the downward spiral continuing. And it's definitely something that takes a lot of time to learn not to do that, to not be too judgmental and too hard on ourselves. You got to have that healthy balance of, motivation without humiliation, really.
Well said. That's my biggest struggle is the negative talk and getting stuck in that part of it. And if I'm not successful right away at something, then it's like, yeah, I'm disappointing everyone around me, including myself. And I'm curious. I've talked to a couple people who have had experience with losing loved ones in really tragic situations, in mass killings and things. So now I'm talking to someone who has done a school shooting. I'm curious what led you to that decision, and because I'm assuming you didn't have this attitude and this outlook on life back then.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the positive mindset that I have today is after many years of therapy and support from a lot of people. When I was growing up and I was a teenager, I didn't know how to cope with my emotions at all. And I think that it doesn't come naturally to anybody, but I do think that whether it's environmental situations or, chemical situations within the brain. And I'm not saying that to blame anything because there's so many people who go through worse and have experienced worse mental health. Most people who have mental health never think about hurting anybody else or traumatizing other people. So I know that I'm on the fringe, but I tell people that it comes to a few different parts of because I talk a lot about prevention and how we can prevent these crimes from happening and tragedies from happening, is when people oftentimes feel like they don't have power and control over their lives, right? Which so many of us feel like we don't have power and control. But for some, myself included, it just becomes overwhelming. And when you feel like you're trying to do the right thing and you're being ignored, it creates a grievance. And with law enforcement and the FBI that I've done some talking with, and I've learned from them, the pathway to violence begins with a grievance. So I would say that my grievance really started when I reached out as a teenager to my family and said, something's wrong. I'm not feeling right. Like, I'm just not in the mindset that I used to be. My grades had gone from mostly B's and some A's to suddenly C's, D's, and F's. And I could no longer find joy in anything. I quit playing sports. I've been playing baseball, as a kid growing up. And I tried other sports, but I love baseball. And I left everything behind. And I still hung out with friends, but I wasn't having that meaningful connection with my friends anymore. Like I still wanted to be around people, but I would feel alone when I was in a room full of people who cared about me. And like I said, so when I reached out to my family and my mom, she did everything she could, but she was in over her head. So, she brings me to the doctor. I start seeing a psychologist, start going to a psychiatrist also to get medication. And, I start SSRIs, antidepressants, anti-anxiety pills, sleeping pills. I end up on a cocktail of medication. But so we're also at that time asking the school for help because, I'm spending 8 hours a day there. I'm struggling with my grades. I want to get back on track. And the school basically tells me, like, there's nothing we can do. I'm sorry. And so my mom was looking into it, and she said, well, what about an IEP, an individual education plan? And the school says, no, he doesn't fit the criteria. We have to start quoting their own paperwork to them and saying, yes, I do fit the criteria. I have, clinical depression, which meets in their paperwork. And they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to help me. And I downward spiraled a little bit. And this is when I'm 15 years old, about a year before the shooting. And
sorry, what year is this?
So this is 2003. The shooting happened February 9th of 2004. But so in the beginning of 2003, this is when I'm trying to get my life back on track. I'm trying to do all the right things. And when I got denied a bit from the school, I felt that rejection and I kind of spiraled a little bit. I started cutting myself, which I hadn't been doing before. And one of my teachers saw it, called my mom, told her about it. And she asked if I'd be willing to go into a mental hospital, voluntarily to get some intensive care and help, which I said, yeah, sure. But then when I was in the hospital, it was kind of like, all right, they're doing what they can. But because I was a minor, I was also having to do school while in the hospital. One problem was the school that I was attending refused to send any classwork or anything to the hospital, which the hospital was saying, we've got 20 other adolescents here. Nobody else is experiencing this at any of the other schools around here. So again,
so that's building resentment,
and I'm not saying any of this to blame, but I want to give people the mindset, the disturbed. I start to form this resentment, like you said, and I start to be like, oh, I'm doing everything I can. Other people are doing what they can, but the people at this school don't care. And so, it was kind of that uphill battle with them, because then even when I got out of the hospital, I'd spent a week there, and as I'm trying to get back into school, things just aren't working. And again, they won't give me an IEP, and they tell my mom, well, how about you homeschool him, right? Sign him up for homeschooling because there's nothing else we can do here. And my mom is like, all right, so she hires, tutor and everything like that to meet me at a library. And I tried that out. But as you can imagine, isolating somebody who is extremely depressed, was one of the worst things that we could have been doing, because then I'm feeling more and more alone. And, it just didn't help with anything. And so then we basically ended the homeschooling, put me back in school. But by the time this happened, it's like May, and my mom says, all right, she hires an attorney and has the attorney meet up with school officials and say, why aren't you giving him an IEP? They claimed that I didn't fit the criteria. He said, we all know that he does, and you're facing a lawsuit and a lot of bad publicity if you don't help this kid out. To which suddenly they're like, oh, well, yeah, actually, you know what? I think we can give him an IEP. I think we can give him all this extra stuff now. So again, there was no love lost between me and some of the administrators. But so with this resentment towards the school and feel like I'm trying to do what I can to get my life back on track, but they're not just ignoring me, but full on just trying to do everything they can to push me out of their way. That's where a lot of the animosity begins. And the following school year, right, because this is in the spring of 2003. So when we get into fall of 2003, I'm turning 16 in October. I had been looking into, well, I'm going to drop out, get my GED, and, continue on with my, either college or military. And unfortunately, I didn't realize that because I turned 16 after the school year started, they said, no, you can't leave, you can't drop out, you're stuck here. In New York, state law might be different than other states. However, my psychologist recommended that I look into one of the community colleges nearby, and we found out that I could be what they call dual enrolled, where I was enrolled at the community college for continuing education program, where I'd be able to take college courses, get some credits for college while also getting my GED there. And basically, even though I was still technically enrolled at the high school, I was just no longer going to go there.
Right. What are they going to do?
Yeah. But then that's when, as January and the spring semester start up at the community college, I start up there. And I'll say that I'm 16 and I'm a big kid, right? But still, there's that real, I'm more self-conscious than normal because now I'm around these 18, 19, 20-year-olds. And it's not that I wasn't talking with people, but every time I tried to really gain traction with a new friendship with different classmates, there'd always be the voice in the back of my head that's like, you don't fit in here. What are you doing? Because I was really self-conscious about just those couple of years made a lot of difference in my mind. And
well, it's true though. Whether you're in grade 12 or your second year university or college or whatever, those 2 years are kind of a big 2 years.
Yeah. So, I'm no longer around my friends from high school, except on the weekends and stuff like that. I was dating at this time, but, you do what you can to make things work. But it just wasn't the same, obviously, anymore, right? I'm not around my usual peers, my friends. Things just aren't clicking in the community college and whatever. So I'm still trying to be more positive at this time. I'm also looking into maybe joining the military when I turned 18. And so I've got all these plans for the future that are starting to pop up in my mind. And with therapy and with all the medication and everything, I had been improving, and they had taken me off of a lot of the medications I had been on because, unfortunately, on a superficial level, everything from the outside looking in looks good, right? It's okay. He's taking these, college courses. He's talking about his future. Everything looks good for him. And so the medication starts coming off. And I'm still backsliding, though. I'm still having those hard nights where I can't sleep. I'm ruminating. I'm depressed. I'm suicidal at times. And it's a struggle that I didn't want to admit to anymore because once I was seeming to do better, I didn't want to admit to my mom, my friends, even my therapist. I didn't want to admit that, you know what? No, it's not all getting better. I'm still struggling.
And why did you want to not admit it? Is it scary?
I mean, part of it was scary. Part of it was also, I never wanted to truly open up all the way. I never dealt with some of the deeper issues where I had been sexually abused as a young child. I never opened up about that to anybody, not even my therapist, because I was at such a confused point where coming to realization that, yeah, at 5, 6, 7 years old, I didn't know what it was, but there was that part of me that was afraid of what other people will think of me once they find out. Will they still accept me? Will they still see me as the same person? Will my girlfriend, question my sexuality? I had all those things going on in my mind that, at 16 years old, obviously this is a very heavy situation to be questioning myself about, is how will others view me if they realize this sexual abuse, but in my mind, I took part in it, right? It wasn't until years later that I'd realized I hadn't done something wrong. I had something wrong done to me at that time as a small child, right? I still felt some of the guilt, the shame, and embarrassment. So I knew that that was kind of a root of some of my problems, and that I was unable to deal with the root, so I didn't want to open up and dive too deeply into some of these issues. So again, I dealt with a lot of the superficial things, and that just creates a situation where the foundation of my house was crumbling while I was building up all this new stuff on top of it, right? And so that's when it comes to one of my older brothers was coming home from Iraq. He had been in the military for a few years and he was getting out, and he started to talk to me about, hey, why don't we start hunting together? How would you like to do that? And yeah, I had, my other brother, he had taken me to the firing range, before, and it was kind of like, yeah, that'd be pretty interesting. I'd love to learn how to hunt, and doing all of that would be great. So I mentioned to my mom, and she's like, hell no. I'm coming through all these problems and everything, and she's still worried about me. Now, it's been about a year since I've been hospitalized, but of course, obviously, she's still very concerned about me. But I go to my therapist, and I'm telling my psychologist, sorry, I got my
That's
my
okay.
one cat is, I'm not paying attention to her, so
Yeah.
I apologize. I do all I can, and
It's never enough.
it's never enough. So sorry. So
No problem.
so when I go to my psychologist, and I know that he's a hunter as well, and I mentioned to him like, hey, this is what's going on. My older brother wants to hunt with me. What do you think? And he's like, no, I think it would be all right. And I think you've been doing a lot better. Again, I never opened up to him fully. And so he gives it the green light. He always invited my mom in at the end for like the last 5-minute wrap up, so that, I could maybe say something to her with him as a mediator, or vice versa, or she can just kind of, ask questions and everything from him. But so he explains to her, no, he thinks that I'm doing much better. I'm no longer a threat to myself or others. And his exact phrasing that we still both remember very vividly, he says, you have your son back. So my mom, hearing that, she's thinking, she's been worried about coming home and finding me dead, or, worried about so many other things. And now she's hearing from my therapist that you have your son back, so she's thinking this was just a little bump in the road. The dark times are behind us. And then even we go in to see my psychiatrist, and my psychiatrist says the same thing of, yeah, I have no problem with him having access to a gun or hunting or anything like that. And so I'm thinking, all right, cool. But then it was actually my mom a few days later. She says, hey, there's a gun store in town. They're actually going out of business. Why don't we go down there, check it out, and take advantage of the sales? Said, yeah, sure. I had been interested in, looking at different hunting rifles and everything, but she says she's interested in a shotgun. She had her first husband, when they were younger, they had done some like skeet shooting and stuff like that. Not to mention the shotgun would be hers. She can use it for that and self-defense when I'm no longer living with her and she's all by herself. So yeah, so we go there, and sure enough, my mom had also that morning had gone and speak with the local police department, just asking, "Hey, is there anything I should know about having a firearm with a 16-year-old son in the house?" And they basically told her, just buy a lock, keep it locked up. Other than that, there's nothing else that we know of. So she does all the right steps, but we're literally in the gun store. She buys the shotgun, and in my mind, this is Saturday, 2 days before the shooting. In my mind, I'm just thinking about hunting and everything. I'm still in a pretty positive mindset. But when I start to share with some of my friends and family later that night, like, hey, got this shotgun, can't wait, going to be going hunting and doing all this stuff. Some of my friends and family, they start to share their concern. They're worried about me. But in my distorted mind, I start to say, oh, they don't trust me. I've made all this progress. I've done all this work, and still they don't trust me. They don't believe in me. And that really starts the downward spiral. Saturday night, I'm out with friends Saturday night as well. But I wake up Sunday morning and I'm just like, it's one of those gray, cold February days in upstate New York. And I'm just finding myself more and more miserable. And by the evening time, I'm thinking like, I'm tired of trying. I'm tired of, trying to improve myself and do the right thing. As much as I try to do, other people aren't going to help me. They're not going to trust me. Again, this is me distorting it because these people love me and care about me. And although I might have had struggles at the high school, I had family and friends who cared about me and were doing everything they could to help me get my life on track. But
right. Sorry, I was just gonna say I kind of relate as someone that's been sober and has gone through addiction and stuff. When someone questions you, like, where were you? Like, and you are so proud of your sobriety and stuff, and then someone questions you or like does not trust you still because they think you're going to relapse or you did relapse. It's like, yeah, you get resentful. It's like, well, I may as well fucking relapse then, and I'm going to do it hard. Right?
yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of understand that mindset of like, that distorted thinking of,
Yeah. And so
these are people that love me and care for me and are worried for me. It's all out of love, but you take it and turn it into everyone's against me and nothing's good enough. And
exactly.
yeah.
And there's so much more that I could have done at that moment, right? I could have either just broken down and opened up fully to my mom or called my therapist or, my sister. I had, like I said, a lot of people who supported me and who were doing what they could. But instead of opening up and truly working more and more on myself, I wanted to give up. And this is where I start to think, well, I've got this shotgun now. Now it's no longer, what pills do I have to take to end my life? Or how long will it take for me to bleed out? It is simply a pull of the trigger and I'm gone. No pain, no mistakes, no worrying. The pain and suffering is over with. But then I also start to think outwardly, right? And this is where, unfortunately, I start to think, well, it's not my fault, right? That's what I want to tell myself. This isn't my fault. It's other people's fault. And I start to blame the people at the school. Well, if they had done more to help me when I asked for help, I could have gotten my life back on track and none of this would have happened. I would never have had to basically, like I said, try to drop out and have this, dual enrollment with the community college where things aren't working. I could have been doing, just fine in the high school with all of my friends and everybody. But no, they didn't want to help me. And that's where it starts to be, you know what? I want them to feel my pain. I want them to feel my suffering. I want them to never forget me. And that's when I start to think about going into the school. And I'm not thinking about going on, a killing spree that we see all too often in the news today. I wanted to traumatize and terrorize, and I knew I could do that. Like in my mind, I had all different scenarios, right? Just showing up and, shooting out car windows in the parking lots, or going in there and, just, shooting around in the hallway, or even going into a classroom and, shooting out the window. Completely horrible, but that was what's going on in my mind, because again, I wanted to be heard and seen when I felt that I had been ignored. And I wanted to feel some type of control in my life when I felt that I never had any. So that's when it came to my mind that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to make sure that they never forget about me, and that they're going to have to be forced to look at me to see what they have created. That's what I'm telling myself, that this is not my fault, right? I didn't want to take responsibility at 16. It's all their responsibility. This is their fault. So I write out a suicide note Sunday night, and I'm popping Xanax at the time too, because that was the one medication that I'm still on. Because also part of me is trying to talk myself out of it. And that's one of the important things that I always tell people is, I think when it comes to whether it's the horrible tragedies where many people get killed, or whether people end their own life, or even, as you mentioned, if people are struggling with addiction, there's that battle within up until the last moment, right?
The Canadian Centre for Addictions believes in being the home away from home you need to begin healing. From private rooms, residential treatments, and caring support, their luxury rehab centers offer the best inpatient care. Here, you decide how much you would like to finance, whether it's the entire amount for treatment or just a portion, and what repayment terms fit your needs, from 6 months to 6 years. 5-Star Care helps our residents learn how to lead 5-star quality lives. To learn more, please call today.
I was fighting myself. I was taking the Xanax a little bit more than I was prescribed, because I'm thinking, this is what I take to calm myself down. This is what I take to relax that voice in my head that just keeps ruminating and going over all these things over and over again. And it doesn't really help. It pretty much just knocks me out that night. And when I wake up the next morning, I just kind of go on autopilot. I'm still having that voice in the back of my mind saying, this isn't right, we can't do this. But it's the self-doubt. Why would I stop? What am I going to do? My life's never going to have meaning and purpose. My life is never going to amount to anything. I'm struggling with all these suicidal thoughts, and I've been hospitalized, and I've been on all these medications. I'm never going to be, accepted into the military, or, I've thought about joining the police force later on. I'm never going to be able to do any of these things because of my mental health. I'm never going to be finding any type of meaning and purpose. So why bother, right? And that was a pretty common theme in my teenage years, is why bother? So unfortunately, I was just on autopilot, and I had found where my mom kept the key, because she had the shotgun locked up. I basically just grabbed the one box of ammunition. I knew it was 7.5 grade bird shot. It's for target practice, basically. But I know that my plan is not to kill, but to, like I said, terrorize, shoot out windows, or just, cause mayhem, cause the police to show up. And if I don't manage to, put myself into a corner where I'm able to pull the trigger on myself, then the police definitely will. They'll definitely end me. And so I drove in to school late that day, and I had the shotgun in its case, because it's a hard black case that I knew, from looking at a distance, people are going to think it's an instrument case. And I had my backpack on, and I, park in the parking lot, walk in the front door. Like I said, I'm coming in late, and there's nobody there. But now I'm also, as I'm walking through the front door, now I'm starting to panic a little bit. Now it's becoming real. And I just go straight upstairs into the area that had always been like the main area that I had, where most of my classes had been and everything. And I go right into the boys' bathroom, and I go into a stall. And now, again, I'm just kind of freezing, in thinking, like, what am I doing? I want to get out of here, but it was like once I walk through that door, now I'm afraid to turn around and walk out, that I'll be caught walking out. So I feel like I'm at the point of no return. But again, I always want people to know you're never at the point of no return. You can always turn things around. Even at that point, I could have called my mom. I could have called my therapist. There's so many things I could have done. Instead, I did try to call one of my friends, thinking maybe he can like talk me down. Maybe just hearing his voice will relax me. But this is also 2004. Cell phones are, people have them, but they're not as common. He has his buried in his book bag. He never even knows until later on that I was trying to reach out to him. But yeah, so I'm literally sitting in the bathroom, shotgun in my hands now, and I was in there for a good 30 minutes, if not longer. Where class had ended, and I hear the hallways fill up. I hear people coming into the bathroom, and little do they know, I'm literally sitting right there. And I was thinking about, like, all right, can I just manage to, like I said, just shoot myself right here, right now? But I couldn't. And so unfortunately, I wait until, I hear the bathroom empty out in the hallway, and, the bell rings and the next period starts. And I'm kind of like, this is it. This is, there's no turning back. And I sent out a text message to a couple of my friends, because I'm thinking, like, all right, I know I'm going to be terrorizing a lot of people. I don't want them to be seeing me like this. And yeah, I start to walk out. And as I'm coming out of the bathroom, there's one student who's actually just coming around the corner, and he's coming in. And he freezes up in front of me, and he's maybe 3, 4, 5 feet away at most. And he's just frozen there, like staring at me like, who the fuck expects to see this? And he literally says, this can't be real. This can't be happening. And he turns around and he runs away. And I'm just kind of walking out of the bathroom, and, all emotion, everything was gone for me at that point. I don't remember any of my thoughts. I remember every sound. I remember every sight. But I don't remember my thoughts. It was kind of like I dissociated a bit. I went on autopilot, and I come out and I come around the corner, and I see 2 other students. They're down the hall, coming around the other corner, like 30, 40 feet away. And they just freeze up, because, again, who expects to see that? And, one of them, he even yells out, "Oh shit." And so we're out in that hallway, but there's these classrooms, and some of the doors are open. And a teacher in one of the classrooms, she hears him saying this, not knowing what's happening. And I even remember hearing her saying, watch your mouth. Because again, to her, it's any other day. And, but that's when I point the gun up and away, and I start firing. I fire. And, like I said, they're 30, 40 feet away. And they turn and they go back down that other corner and run for their lives. And now everybody knows. Everybody's heard. And I'm walking.
Did you shoot towards them?
I shot down the hall, but, the bird shot went like I said, it was up and away. It went mostly up into the ceiling. One of the shots was lower, but, away from them and hitting the walls. And, because my goal was to terrorize them. They're seeing the gun pointed down the hall. They're thinking they're about to die, but they don't know. It's pointed a little bit away from them. They're, like I said, unfortunately, it's been 20 years now. The wife of one of them reached out to me a few months back, and she told me about how much he still struggles with the PTSD.
Sure. Yeah.
But
because I mean, in their mind, they have no idea. They think
have no idea.
They are about to die.
They are about to die. They're both. I think they're both about the same age as me. They're 16, 17 years old, and yeah. And then I'm just walking around the hall, and I'm just waiting. Like at this point, it's just kind of like, all right, it's just a matter of time before the police show up, right? But I remember I'm walking and, the doors are closed. I'm not even touching the doors, but I see this one door wide open and I just walk over to it. And I step into the doorway and I don't walk in there, but I just step in the doorway. And now everybody can see me because it's a room full of students just hiding underneath their desks, hiding from me. And I remember the teacher being at the front of the, she's underneath this table in the center of the classroom up front, and she's just looking at me with terror. And she cries out, "Oh Lord." And then this one girl, she pops up from her desk, just kind of looking up over her desk, and she's got the confusion and terror in her eyes because she was one of the people I was just hanging out with Saturday night, But I turn around and I walk out, and I'm walking down the hallway now.
Did you have emotion at this point? Like, were you feeling satisfied that you were like, okay, this is what I
wouldn't say it was emotion, but yeah, I think at that time I knew, like, all right, I think I stepped into that classroom because, again, I wanted a little bit more of that, I wanted people to see me. Mm-hmm. And I know it's horrible because they're all thinking they're about to fucking die. But yeah, so when I turn around and I walk back out and I'm walking down the hall, again, I'm just thinking it's just a matter of time before the police are here. But little did I know, there's an assistant principal. He had been in his office. He hears everything, and nobody's thinking it's a gunshot. No, a lot of people that are a bit of a distance away, they're all thinking that, there had been some construction going on. Maybe something had gone on with construction, or, maybe somebody setting off firecrackers or something like that. Nobody's thinking that there's an actual shooting happening. And so he comes to investigate, and, he comes around the corner and he sees me walking the other way. So he comes up behind me, and now, I've got the shotgun down at my hips, and he reaches around and he grabs the barrel on one side of me and he grabs the stock on the other side, and he just starts to like squeeze and kind of like bear hug, using the gun to like hold me still. And, but now I'm like surprised and shocked, and I start to try to like push away from him. I'm trying to like push the gun down, and it's not working, and I start to try to like jerk back and forth, shaking him off my back basically. And I didn't know that there was a teacher that was coming up behind us to help the assistant principal disarming me. And like I said, I'm shaking this guy, my fingers on the trigger, and the gun goes off. And the teacher who was coming up behind us, unfortunately, he gets hit in the shin. I didn't even know I'd shot somebody until later on. All I'm thinking of is like, I'm trying to get this guy off my back, as we're standing there. But like I said, he's kind of like bear hugging me using the shotgun. And finally I let go, and I just say, fine, I give up. And he kind of takes me off, into one of the teacher's offices, and, lays me down, and he basically sits on my back while we're waiting for the police to come. And that was basically it. People start showing up asking, what happened, why, but I'm still at this point pretty emotionless, pretty, separated from everything that's going on, from what I had just done, from the harm I just caused everybody. I'm not there mentally. But yeah, like I said, like there's no justifying what I've done. There's no explanation that makes sense, that makes it sound rational. When I explain to you and others about it, I'm not making those excuses. I'm trying to make sense of it myself for many years.
Well, yeah, it's completely complex. It's there's no
Yeah,
one thing that could have changed that would have
it's
stopped.
it was the perfect storm. That's what I had one psychologist say, is the perfect storm of, whether it's issues dealing with the sexual abuse or just chemical imbalance or just the problems with the school and, uh, different things coming all together.
Access to a gun.
Access to a gun, 100%.
Yeah.
Because without
Yeah, all
access
of
to
it.
that gun, it never would have happened.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so I get locked up and I spend 17 years in prison. I'm not going to tell you that I turned my life around right away, because for a while I'm just kind of still numb. I'm still separated from what I had done. And, especially prisons, it's a whole other world of getting used to. So, that wall just stays up in order to protect myself. But it took a while, and it was mostly thanks to my family never giving up to me, some of my friends never giving up on me, people from around the community reaching out to me while I was in prison. It took a few years, but eventually I just kind of hit that point where I was like, all right, I have to figure out how I can do better, how I can, live some type of life of meaning and purpose, and believe in myself, believing in the idea that I could have a life of meaning and purpose after I'd done something so horrible. And that's something that I always try to get through to people. It doesn't matter what you've done, whether you've experienced, whether you've been the victim of a crime or whether you've committed a crime. I believe everybody has a path towards healing and towards living a meaningful and purposeful life. And even for those who are never getting out of prison, I met a lot of guys who are never getting out of prison, know that they're never getting out of prison, but they still believe in healing and getting their life back on track, even if it's from within maximum security prison. And those were also the types of guys that helped supported me turning my life around,
Was there a turning point in there that, like, I'm sure there was a slow buildup of wanting to heal and stuff,
So
but
it's
there was
definitely
no.
a slow buildup, but I'd say that there's many different things, whether it was, I did get into this like voluntary program that was a therapeutic community where you're kind of going to, like group therapy, self-help classes, all those things that you think would be in every prison. They're not. Unfortunately, the prison system is not set up as much as we might think or hope to help people turn their lives around. But I did finally hear about and get transferred into this one therapeutic community where I could do that. And that was when I started to be around more and more people who were like-minded, trying to turn their lives around. And honestly, I just connected with the therapist who really got me to open up and to talk about these things. Not to mention, as far as dealing with a lot of the sexual abuse that I dealt with as a child, seeing another man open up and talk about it is really what helped me open up and talk about it myself. That's why I try to open up and talk about that as well, because it's not talked about enough, whether it's men or women. But I think, at least in the past, I'd say 10 years or now, we've had more momentum with the Me Too movement and women speaking out. But still, I think there's a big hesitancy and a large stigma for men to talk about being victims of sexual abuse.
And when another man, whoever opened up to you, and it's almost like they're giving you permission to talk about it.
Exactly. And,
which is great, but it's like, you shouldn't need permission. You should just feel comfortable wherever you are to be able to open up.
And you know what it is, especially when, I'm in prison, I'm in my early 20s, but here's this guy, he's an older guy, big buff guy, you know what I mean? Kind of the stereotype, kind of not, you know what I mean? He looks the part, but then he's willing to open up and be vulnerable and to share these dark places within himself and the dark past that he has that most are ashamed of, like I was. And so seeing him being strong in that moment, like you said, gave me the permission to stay strong while opening up about it. I was no longer questioning, am I weak talking about this? No, it was, I can be strong talking about this, which it was, because then even as I started to open up and talk about it, then other people would come to me sometimes and be like, oh my God, dude, like I never thought I'd hear somebody else talk about it, especially not in here. I had something going on, when I was a kid too. And so the more I opened up as well, it's kind of this like paying it forward, and it's really beneficial. And that really helped me. And then I too started to be around more guys who were in recovery from addiction, and seeing them working the 12 steps or going to AA or NA. And that was the first time where I realized, like, okay, the whole each one teach one. Those of us who have been through the darkness can work on getting through it and now help others get through it as well. And I never had addiction problems, thankfully, but I started to realize, okay, but I've had all these mental health issues. I've had all these, real suicidal thoughts and wanting to even, traumatize and terrorize other people. Now I can open up and get through this darkness and help other people through that same darkness. And so that's what, when I, as the years went on and I started to be a little bit more open about all of this, and I remember it was after the massacre down in Parkland, Florida, one of the local newspapers wrote a piece talking about me as well, and the tragedy that my community had been through, and how they were grateful that it wasn't a massacre like at Parkland. And I wrote in response basically saying, for the first time I wanted to open up a little bit and just say, I'm sorry for what I've done. I think the principal who grabbed me saved my life. He's a hero for, going after somebody instead of running away from somebody with a gun. And I also wanted to support those survivors from Parkland who were speaking up and getting the attention and the momentum. And I was hopeful, just as I think the nation was hopeful, that seeing the March for Our Lives movement would create some type of drastic change nationwide that would prevent more tragedies from happening like it. And then writing that, I started to get some people reaching out to me more. And I had spoken with some, academic types doing studies previously, as they questioned me on why I did it, what was my childhood like, all those things. And yeah, as I get ready to come home, I'm believing in myself. I'm believing, I can, help out. I can help in many different ways. And I became very interested as well in homelessness, because as I'm getting ready to go home, I'm looking around at all the other guys who are getting ready to get out. And I'm realizing a lot of them, they're getting out, but they're not going home. They don't have family or even a friend or somebody who's willing or able to take them in. So they're going to some type of shelter or halfway house. And I'm realizing just how blessed I am that, I'm going home to live with my mom. Sure, I'm 33 years old and, it's not fun to live with your mom at 33, but it's a hell of a lot better than prison or homelessness. So I recognize this blessing that I have. And, yeah, when I come home, I was also blessed to have a job lined up where it was just a job to pay the bills. You know, friends of the family had their own small business and had always told me whenever I got out that they would hire me, and they stayed true to their word. But eventually I wanted more. You know, I got another job working at a hotel. I loved it. They loved me. But I wanted to help. I wanted to do something meaningful. I wanted to give back to the community I had once hurt so badly.
Be sure to subscribe and to like this video. You can listen on Apple Podcast and Spotify. This is Todd Rennebaum saying, make your beds and take your meds. Keep watching for more interviews with incredible people telling their stories of resilience and adversity with mental health and mental illness.